Okay, so what we're going to look at now, so building the HTTP server, we've talked about the protocols, which is, it's basically all just kind of text that gets sent around, but everyone agrees on the formats. So it's just like, if you fill out the form correctly, then we'll proceed further. So it seems very magic, and there's lots of different layers. So there's HTTP, that's kind of on the top. There's lots of layers underneath that. Different networking layers, which you don't have to get into, but it's all kind of this. HTTP sits on top of a complicated system. So in order to maybe get a better feel for how all of this kind of works and just give you some introspection abilities, we'll look at some tools that we can use to make requests to HTTP servers that tools that aren't the browser. So let me share my screen. So we'll start with the command line tool. I'm sure people have been using this yesterday, at least some people. A couple of people finished the challenge, but cURL is a command line tool you can use to make HTTP requests, and it's very useful and handy. You can use it in scripts and everything else. So we can make a call here, so cURL, and let's go to example.com, www.example.com. And when we do that, we get a whole bunch of stuff. So what did we get? We made this request to example.com, and what did we get?
The source of the web page.
Yeah.
Source code.
Yeah. So if we went in our browser to example.com, this is in fact that same thing, except our browser is taking care of rendering it for us. But if you look at the sources, what we're actually getting sent, it's the same thing. It's an HTML document. Okay, so we can do this. We can do this with cURL. It's not going to actually display as a website for us, but this works. There's another tool that I'll introduce here called Postman. So this is not like a command line tool. It's a little bit more involved. But it's also very commonly used in the real world. So it can be complicated. You can do a lot of things with it, but the basic use case, it's very straightforward. So when you download it, you install it, you eventually get to a screen that looks like this, and we can enter a URL and then determine what kind of request we're making. So get, post, and so on. So let's make a GET request to example.com. And we can click send. And we get the same thing, right? The same thing we saw from in Chrome if we use the browser. When we use cURL, we're using this tool, Postman. We get the same thing. We get HTML. And we can, so Postman has some nice features. We can view it kind of raw, we can view it pretty, like formatted as like if we were editing this in our in an HTML file in an IDE or something. Preview, this is what it would actually look like. And we can also get other information that's pretty easy to see here. So what is this? 200 OK.
It's the status code and saying that you got a good reply back from the server.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can get other information here. Okay, so that can be useful. Maybe we'll come back to that later. But that, that's not all that's, so this HTTP or HTML document that we're getting, this is just at the very, very top of a lot of other stuff that's happening on the network. So we can see a little bit more of what's happening if we can add a flag. So we have our curl command here, go into example.com, and we're going to add a -v. So this is verbose. So it's going to give us a little bit more information about what's actually happening. So we still get the same web page here. We still get this HTML document. We also have this other stuff up here. So we can ignore the first couple lines and focus right here. So what is this thing?
It's a GET request.
So I am making a GET request, and so this is the method that I'm using. So where is this coming from?
Is that header data?
It is. Whose header data?
Client.
Yeah. So the client, in this case, me. So the curl. So I'm making a request. I'm initiating a request. So this is a request header. I am the client. I want to talk to the server. So I initiate a request, and curl under the hood is sending this. So all I did was say curl website, but curl under the hood transforms this into this protocol, this form, specifically formatted string, basically. And it says, okay, you want to make a GET request. I didn't tell it to make a GET request. It just does that by default because I didn't tell it otherwise. I could tell it to make a POST request, but I didn't. And what is this second thing right here?
The URI.
Yeah. So this is the endpoint. So if I were going to / users, example.com/users, let's just do that real quick. You see how that's different now? So the host is still the same. The host is the server. I'm the client. I'm the requester. I make a request to a host or a server, and that's at www.example.com. I'm, in this case, I'm making a GET request to this host name /users, and I want to use, I'm saying this is the protocol. So HTTP /1.1. There's HTTP 2 now, but I'm not sure that that's very commonly used. User agent. What is the user agent?
The web browser that you're using.
Yeah. In this case, I'm using curl to make the request. So curl is filling this information. If I go to my web browser, to Chrome, I'll go to the network. So if I want to see the headers in Chrome, I go to network, and I'll have to, so once I go to network, it'll start basically recording for me, and I'll refresh here, make a new request. And here's the request to example.com. You can click on this, and then I can take a look at the headers. So I made a request. So let's look at the response header. So let's look at the request headers. So Chrome is, there's more going on. It's not just a kind of bare bones command line tool. It's going to do a whole bunch of other stuff for me. So here are the headers that it's sending. So user agent, instead of being curl, it's Mozilla and so on. It's giving my operating system and the Chrome, and so a whole bunch more information that it's sending as the user agent. Still, the host is the same. The host is still example.com. And then the response headers that I'm getting should be the same response headers here. So again, just noticing the format. So we have headers, and then we have a blank line. And then this is the response from the server. So I make the request. Here's my request headers. Then I get a response from the server. And in this case, I was looking for /users on example.com. And example.com doesn't have /users. So instead of getting a nice 200 OK response, I get a 404 not found response. And we can see that the server is sending me more information. It's still sending me HTML. So I'm still getting HTML ultimately. And I get things like content length. So content length 12. This is, basically how many characters are in this response, the HTML that I'm getting sent. So that's a basic kind of, it's a way for you can use Postman. Let me take a look at, let's make another request using Postman. So we'll send another request. Let's look at the headers. So right here, again, all these tools will give you, because the same things are happening in the network. It's just a matter of how they're, how these tools are presenting it to you. So here are the headers. It's the same thing, right? So I have content length, in this case, 684, which is this, all the HTML in this document. So 684. Tag and so on. I can look at my request headers up here. So the user agent is, again, a little bit different. So it's not cURL. I think that Postman probably uses some fork of cURL based on the version number. But so when I use Chrome, I get Chrome, and it also sends not just Chrome information, but information about my operating system. cURL just says it's cURL, and Postman says it's Postman. So the specific headers can be different because these headers are being constructed by the agent that I'm using. So if we were writing this from scratch, we could include our own headers. We could use whatever information we wanted to include headers. Okay, so this is just a form. Some parts of the form are optional, some parts are mandatory. All right, so I think that's probably a good introduction to cURL and Postman. So let's go ahead and take a look at the challenge. So before I do anything, I'll go ahead and clone this. Well, I should fork it. Okay. So let's try doing that again. All right, so I'm gonna fork this. And I'm gonna clone it. All right, so now I'm in here. I have this server.py, this starter file. This looks like a bunch of just random nonsense to me. So let's take a look at the README. So we're trying to build an HTTP server using Python. All right. So it's telling us about protocols. So there's, there's the TCP, there's IP, there's HTTP, there's network layers. There's either 7 layers or 5 layers, depending on how you want to classify things. But everything from this HTML document that you get all the way down to, switches. All right. So let's go ahead and we could try running this. Looks like it probably should run. Okay, I have to change the port. Where would that be? All right, let's try that again. We could just change the port number here, but okay. So it looks like this is running. It says it's printing out waiting for connection, and then it's just kind of hanging here. So I'm not sure what's happening. Let's take a look at this file real quick. So it looks like we're importing the socket module from Python. We haven't downloaded anything. So I'm going to assume that this is something in the Python standard library. So there's a socket module. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't understand, but it looks like we're creating an instance of maybe a socket class or something. And then on that, we're set sock opt. So it looks like we're maybe just changing some configuration on this server instance that we have. I don't know what any of these things do. There's a note, but then we're calling this another method on this server instance. I don't know what bind does, but who could tell me what this number is?
Port number.
Yeah, it's a port number. So what is the port number?
It can act as like a specific connection to a client, I guess.
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah, so you can connect to a given endpoint, but there's not just, your IP address, there's also ports. And how many ports are there for any given?
64,000 or something.
It's 65,536.
Yeah, it's about, yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I guess that's the exact number. It's like 65,000. Can you use all of them?
No, because a lot of them are already taken.
Yeah. So a lot of them are reserved, but most of them are free. So, 9292 isn't taken probably by anything. So it depends on what you have running on your system. You might have an application running in your system that uses port 9292, in which case you have to pick another port. But chances are good that you'll have a free port somewhere. So it looks like we're localhost. So it looks like maybe, so we have this server and maybe we're telling the server to run on localhost at port 9292. And then waiting for a connection, server.listen. Looks like we're not hitting this line. So maybe we're kind of stopping here and just hanging out. So let's try making, we'll use Postman. So how can I, looks like the address I have to go to is localhost, but then port 9292. How do I specify a port.
With a colon.
Okay. So local host. I can use localhost. So localhost is just an alias for an IP address. You could also specifically write the IP address. So localhost colon 9292. That's the port we want. Let's see if this works. Okay, could not get a response. But it looks like something happened. So so it was, I think it was frozen here, although I'm not sure. That's just kind of my guess. And then I made a request and it looks like it kept executing and we get this print statement. So new connection received. So I made a request and it looks like my code here got something. And then maybe it closed because it's not running anymore. But I didn't get any HTML. I didn't get a web page. Nothing happened on this end. Okay, so I'm still a little confused, but maybe I have some idea of what this code is doing. So we'll walk through the code. So we're importing the socket library into Python. Okay. So we get this new socket and we give it af.inet and socket.sockstream. So I don't know anything about that stuff. Maybe we could explore the documentation, but it looks like this will work for now. Okay, we're binding to a specific place, address. Okay. All right, so we've done all this. So it accepts an exit. So let's try running this with curl also. Okay, so we're not running our server. Okay, again, we're getting like something is weird. Something weird is happening. So apparently we're making these connections, but the server maybe isn't doing what it's supposed to, or it's not doing what our clients are expecting it to do. Okay, so what we need to do is let's respond to every request with hello world. To do this, we will use the client connection variable to send or receive data. We have a client connection. Where is that? Right here, client connection. So the client connection can send or receive data, apparently. Read through the Okay, so we need to look at the documentation now. So this documentation is very documentation-y. It's hard to read, and if you don't already know what you're doing, this may not be very helpful, but that's the way it is. And this documentation is better than lots of documentation that you'll run into. So I see send. So there's all kinds. So let's just take a quick tour of the documentation. We get an intro paragraph just describing what it is. So it's a straightforward transliteration of the Unix system call and library interface for sockets. So it's pretty clear what that is now, right? Socket families. We can talk about. So some of this stuff I don't really get. It's a little complicated. Looks like there's a bunch of constants here. Module contents, we get exceptions. There's a whole bunch of exceptions. I won't worry about that right now. There's constants. So I think we're using some of these. You scroll down. And then we get into these methods or functions. So here we're calling this at the very beginning. So socket.socket is kind of probably the main entry point, the main thing that we want to do with this module. With a whole bunch of other methods, you create a server. You can read through some of this stuff. It's just method after method to do all kinds of things. I don't know what these are. So we know that we want to send something. So there's no way that we're going to just read this documentation from top to bottom and understand how everything works. And this is just how it is. So if your approach is, I'm going to start from the top of the document and I'm not going to do anything until I fully understand how Python sockets work, then you're not going to get anything done. So we have a general overview of what this is. So let's go ahead and we'll search for send. 55 results. That's a whole bunch. Sending message. Send. Oh, looks like there's a send method here. That might be important later on. So looks like there's a send method, and then what's happening here? What does it take? What does the send method take as a parameter?
It's like a string.
It does look like a string. Kind of looks like a string.
It's like a list of binary units or something, right? Or byte units.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what this is right now, but I know it looks kind of like a string, but maybe it's a little different. So there's a little B. So I know about F strings. So if I want to, have a formatted string in Python and put an F in front, looks like you can do something by putting a B in front. We'll keep that in mind. Okay, socket.send. Looks like this is probably where I want to focus my attention. Socket.send. So send data to the socket. The socket must be connected to a remote socket. The optional flags argument has the same meaning as for receive. So what does send take? What is the required parameter?
Bytes.
Yeah, so I guess that B means that it's bytes. So maybe it's converting our string to bytes or something. But it looks like send, we're gonna have to give it bytes. So I don't know how to do that, but again, just keeping that in mind. It returns the number of bytes sent. Maybe that will be useful, I'm not sure. So there's also send all, send data. So it looks like this does something very similar. So I'm not sure if we should use send or send all. Maybe send to, send a message. There's a lot of options. I get send looks to be the most basic. So let's try doing that first. So we got told that this client connection is itself a socket. And we know that sockets have a send object. So let's try client connection dot send. And we know we want to send hello world. So hello world. Let's try this and see if it works. Okay, our server is running. So far we haven't broken anything. Let's make a request. Okay, so that didn't work, looks like. Okay, I get a type error. A bytes-like object is required, not a string. So it looks like the documentation was correct. I can't just pass a string. So I saw in the documentation that there's this little b, so maybe that's all I have to do. Okay, I'm a little confused because it kind of looks like it worked, but I also get this, what looks like an error message. So it both worked and didn't work at the same time. Looks like my server is happy. There's no errors here. Everything runs to completion. So my server is happy, but my client is kind of not sure. Let's try, maybe it's just something with curl. So let's try running this in Postman. We'll make another request here. Did not get response. Huh. Okay. So it looks like my server, again, my server is happy. There's no errors. I sent the request, but it says I couldn't get the response. The server returned a malformed response. View in console. Parse error expected HTTP. So I'm not entirely sure what this means, but expected HTTP. So maybe there's a protocol issue. So I'm sending hello world, but my client, maybe my client needs more specific formatting. The curl request, so curl actually gave me what I sent. It showed me what I sent, but it also threw me an error. Maybe the browser will work. Let's try the browser. We'll do 92.92. Refuse to connect. Let me. So it's like this keeps trying to reconnect. This also doesn't work. So my request header. So yeah, it's also doesn't really want to cooperate here. So I can't really see anything. So it looks like I have a problem, but it's kind of working on curl. So I could just keep using curl. So at this point, I'm kind of stuck. I'm not sure what's happening. So I have three different clients that I'm using, and one of them kind of works and the other two don't work. So what we could do is try going another level deeper. And there's another command line tool called Tcp Dump. So we can use Tcp Dump. This will basically capture everything on a given network, so we can look in more detail at what's happening. So again, this is totally optional. I'm just presenting this as something that's available. So I'm gonna have to use sudo. I already know that, but I'll have to run this as the super user, and we'll do TCP dump. We'll just run this and see what happens. Okay, there's a lot going on. I'm gonna stop that. Wow, I just ran that for like a second, and looks like it's like 3,000 packets. This is a lot of stuff happening right there. So I'm gonna want to refine this a little bit. So we're gonna do something called, we'll pass a command line argument to TCP dump. And we can see basically all of our options on a computer. So this is what I care about. So what is Loopback?
It's 127, but it's basically just a way to test your network connectivity just with your with your local host, not with any external networking.
Exactly. So Loopback is localhost. So we have all these different names. We have 127.0.0 whatever .1, and then we have Loopback, and we also have localhost. These all kind of refer to the same thing. So we're running our server on localhost. So what we're going to want to do is we only care about loopback. And so loopback looks like it's called LO0. So we can specify what we want. So sudo tcp dump, and we'll do -i, it's the interface, and L0. And we can also specify a port number. So we're running on port 9292. So instead of just capturing all of the traffic indiscriminately, which, 1 second gives you thousands of results. So we don't want that. So we'll do port 9292. And so now so TCP dump is running and it will update. So let's go ahead and run our server and just see if this is working. So we're going to run our server. Nothing is changing. So let's make a request. You can use. Okay, so we made a request. Nothing happened. But look what we got here. A whole bunch of stuff is happening. So this is a lot to read on a terminal. So what? Again, this is more detailed than you need, but just to show you that a whole bunch of stuff happening. So here we have basically the initiator of the communication and the target. So on my local host, so I didn't tell Postman to use localhost port 58036, but it just randomly chose that. So that was nice of it. I didn't have to tell it that specifically. So it just chose, probably a random port that was open on my system, and it used that to make a request to this other part of my system on another port, which is called localhost.armtech-daemon. I don't know what that is, but it's fine. So it's where my server is running. And I have all these labels, and this is very confusing. So again, you don't need to worry about, but this is like at the TCP level. So there's some connections that are happening under the surface. And then once those are established, there's the HTTP, which will come through. So this is an S, which stands for SYN, SYN. So this is just, there's like, you send a request and then you acknowledge, the other party acknowledges that they received it. Here we're going. So again, we're not going to spend time reading all of this. It's you don't need to know most of it, but here we have something different. So we have P, which means push. This is where we're actually pushing information. So this could be a header. This could be the body. But looks like the client is pushing some data to the server. So if we think about the cycle, that means that's probably my initial GET request. It's length 202. So we could figure that out. We could count up all the characters in that. Where would that even be?
In the header you're sending from cURL or
yes.
Postman?
Yeah. So we could count, actually, maybe that information will be in the headers. I'm not sure we can view
I think
this.
it's in the body.
No.
Because it should have like some type of like length in the body that it's getting pushed.
So the body we're not setting anything in the body. So the length will actually, so this is just the initial header. So there's no content. So there's no body. So it's all this stuff, but I don't know if there's an easy way to see this as just a string, but in either case, that's what it is. And here we have something else, length 11. So what could be length 11? HELO. Yeah.
It's the response.
Yeah. So this is what the server is sending us. So again, P, so it's pushing, and this is the server talking to the client. So they're pushing this. So this is actually getting sent. So I know now, I know for sure that I am making a request, even with Postman. So Postman is telling me that it's not getting anything, but Postman is full of shit. Postman is getting something. It's getting hello world. It just doesn't want to tell me about it. So I have this, I can tell when I capture the network traffic that I actually am getting a response. So my server is sending something, but Postman just isn't happy with how it's formatted. It's like I go to the DMV and I want a driver's license, but I forgot to check a box or something. And they're like, no. Like, if you really wanted to, you could look at this form and tell me, you know what I'm trying to do, but computers are stupid, so they don't do that. So Postman just says, I can handle a specific format. You didn't give it to me in the format, so too bad. Okay, and we could look at the rest of this, but this doesn't necessarily matter. So we know that our server is working and that it's sending stuff. And we also know that it's not sending it in the right format. So let's see if we can fix that. All right, let's go back to the README. So our server quits after sending a response. We can keep the server running. So we can add a while loop here to our server. So we haven't fixed this problem entirely, but let's just say server.listen. Maybe we can try putting the while loop here, something. Something like that. Let's go back here. Where is that? There we go. Okay, and if I can make another request. So it looks like the while loop is working. Now I can keep making requests. I don't have to restart the server. I still have this issue. We could also keep looking at this here, but I'll tell you that what's happening is that the server is doing what this error message is saying. It's connection. It's the server is trying to reset the connection. So this is a minor bug that will exist, but you can actually fix it if you look at you spend enough time playing around with the documentation. So there's something called, I believe it's close. Yeah. This may help close a detached socket using socket.close. So I believe, was it socket.close? Which one was it? Shutdown. All right, so there's another method. If you wanted to like spend 2 or 3 hours last night, like I did, while you should be preparing the lecture, figuring out this particular bug, you come up with shutdown. So let's try adding that. We'll shut down, and then we'll pass it this constant. So before we close the connection, so it's a constant on the socket. We'll pass it this. We'll restart it. And let's try making a bunch of cURL requests. So notice that we're not getting that. Oh, we are getting an error once. Maybe we did it too fast. But so we stopped getting that error now.
Chad, I have
Yep.
a question.
Yeah.
So if you use, I saw you could use like a with socket.socket open as, or with socket.socket as.
Yeah.
Does it
Mhm.
automatically close it and shut it down? So you don't have to do that, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure the details of with is a it's an API for context management in Python, and different there can be different implementations. So I'm not sure exactly what I would imagine that it's what it does is close the connection, but it's possible that it does something else. So I actually haven't tried that, but if we were trying to make this more professional, then you would probably want to use you'd want to put this in a with in a context manager. But we're just basically just trying to keep it simple for right now. So you don't need to do this, but if you're tired of seeing that error, that's how you can fix it. All right, so going back to the README, so it looks like we're good. So we've got our while loop running. So release 0 taken care of. All right, so now, so we've kind of maybe covered up this problem that we had where we're sending improperly formatted response. So our server is not really an HTTP server right now. It's a random bytes server. So we want to make this an HTTP server. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to follow some rules. And so let's go ahead and I'm gonna make a curl request to example.com again. And we'll do it in verbose mode. And let's take a look again at this. So we're gonna have to send a string, essentially. Well, we're gonna have to send bytes. So we know that bytes is what our send method will accept. So ultimately, we're gonna have to send bytes. And it looks like this is a string, or at least representable as a string. So I think what we're gonna have to do is probably create some kind of string, which looks like it's formatted in a particular kind of way, and convert that into bytes. So the way this is formatted, it's not obvious here, but if you look around on stuff and we get this nice hint here, we can see that there's a carriage return and a new line after every line. And then at the very end of the headers, we get 2 of them. So carriage return new line for every header. And then at the end of all the headers, we just get a double dose. So let's take this, we'll copy it. Since we know we're gonna have to do something here, so let's do this here. So and this is gonna be an F string. And it looks like we're gonna have to fix this as well. And then, so if we just follow the format that we're given here, we're gonna have to pass in some text. So we'll make that our text. Hello world. So now we're going to be sending properly formatted. So now we're following the protocol. So we're not just sending whatever we feel like, we're following the rules of HTTP. So, but we can't send a string. So let's try that's not going to work. Yeah, so we have to play around. So it looks like we're not gonna be able to just use what at least the notation we used before. So there's a couple ways to do this. We could do bytes. So we can convert it to bytes, just like if this were, you can convert it to int or string or whatever. So we'll convert it to bytes. let's try doing this.
I think you got a typo in response.
Thank you. So now let's get an entirely different error. Okay, so I get a type error here. So string arguments without an encoding. So I could look up that error and I will find that bytes requires not just what you want to convert, but what you want to convert it from. So UTF-8 is just a character encoding. So now if we send this, we're still getting the same. Well, let's check on a browser and see if. Okay, so now Chrome, the very demanding Chrome browser, is happy. So we're sending it actual HTML, and we can look in the elements here, and we can see that this is in fact our HTML. You can go to Postman as well. So let's make another request. And we can see that this request is also going through. You can see so Postman apparently is also like in some ways more strict, so it's not quite recognizing this as valid HTML, but it's not throwing an error. Okay, so 3 different clients, you get 3 kind of different variations on what gets displayed, but that can be useful sometimes. All right, so now it looks like we're sending proper HTTP. Let's take a look at the README. All right, so it looks like release 1 is taken care of. And let's go to release 2. Parsing the request. Yeah, so what we're doing here at this server, so let's take a look at, so the server is still running. So I'm making a GET request here, right? So let's try making a POST request. Okay, that worked. It's weird. And not handling post patch request also. Okay, make patch. Wow. Options. I can make an options request. This is a really full-featured server that I've developed. Let's try going to google.com. Let's make a GET request. Okay, we get some HTML. Cool. Let's make a POST request to google.com. Method not allowed. What about a lock request? Method not allowed. So google.com is restricting the kind of requests that I can make, and the server that we have developed here is not, because the server that we have developed doesn't care what it's being sent. It's not even paying attention. It's just, did I get a request? Did someone try and contact me? Oh, here's some stuff. So what we want to do is make this behave a little bit more like an actual server, where we're examining the contents of the initial request that we get. So it looks like we're getting a hint here. So we need to, there's a receive method. Okay, receive data from the socket. So we're, from the perspective of the server now, so we're going to receive data from the client. The return value is a bytes object representing the data received. So we're going to get, again, having to deal with bytes. So it looks like bytes is what it's the, the actual transmission medium. So you have to use bytes if you want to actually transmit. So we'll have to deal with bytes again. Okay, there's some is a buffer size. Maybe we don't have to worry about that for right now. So when we get the client's connection, before we send it stuff, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what it's actually sending us. So client connection dot receive. And let's try printing it. Okay, takes one argument. So where do we see something about, oh, there's a note here. For best match with hardware network realities, the value of buffer size should be a relatively small power of 2. For example, this number. So let's just try that number, see if it works. Okay, cool, looks like it works. And I can see here's the bytes object of my request. So I made a GET request and it's formatted, and here's my host. It's coming, this is the actual host that I'm requesting from, and the user agent is cURL, so the client is cURL, which it is. So that looks like I'm actually getting, I'm getting the initial request headers. So that's good. So we're gonna have to convert this from bytes to a string, I think. So decode, can't remember if it's encode or decode. There's a few different options for this, but we'll see if this works. All right, cool. So that worked. So now we're transform that from bytes to a string. And we can see that this looks this should look familiar to us at this point. Should look kind of like this, because that's exactly what we're sending. So now that we have this, so that's cool, I guess. So we could start acting like Google and deny requests. So let's try acting like Google. Google's in charge; they must be doing something right. So let's start telling people what to do. So let's take this string and let's see, HTTP. Are we actually making a GET request here? GET, yes, we are.
Hey, Chad.
Yeah.
Do you want to take like a quick 5-minute break?
Sure. Yeah. Let me. Okay, let me share my screen again. So we're at the point now where we're actually paying attention to what the client is sending us. And right here on line 14, we can actually grab the request object. So what we need to do now is kind of start acting like a typical server that has more than one endpoint. So we're gonna have to check this thing that we're getting and pick out this element. And then we'll have 2 different responses depending on what we get here. So this is just a string. So let me do this. So we'll decode this. So now this is the string. And if I want to get that element, I can split it by new lines, or I could just split it by spaces, and I think take the first one. So decode, let's try dot split. Let's just try printing that out. We'll run the server again. And we get the slash. So I'll change the name of this to something like that. Okay, so that's working. So now we have the specific endpoint that the user is trying to get. So now let's have 2 different paths. So if URI is that, we'll do something else if URI so slash time, we'll do something else. All right, so if it's just a regular thing, then we're going to HTML text will be this. And everything else should be normal. And if it's time, then what we're going to want to do is let's just test it first. So HTML text equals let's see if that works. We'll use Postman here. Okay. I'm getting an error here. Client connection, client address. Prints this out. Let's see, does anyone see anything obvious here? Let's try print. Okay, that's working. Localhost. Yeah. Oh, it's working now. Okay, so it looks like that is working. So now let's work on getting the actual time. So I won't waste time on this. Import time. We'll just do something. I'm sure that will work. Okay, so we're getting the, Unix time. That's fine, in seconds. Close enough. So I think we're good here with at least 2. So now we have, we're actually examining the incoming request, we're parsing it, and then we're sending 2 different responses based on what that initial request was. All right. Let's look at release 3. So we'll do some copy pasting. Basically, this is just going to be making our code not just a jumble of, disorganized mess. So request.py. So this is a request class. So it looks like what we're doing, some of this work has been done for us. We'll just have to figure that out. And then we've got all the work that we've done, all for naught. So we'll go ahead and goodbye code. And we'll put a pass in here. All right, so let's just get reacquainted with this new improved code that we have. So we have a build HTML response method. Looks like it kind of just has the basic format, and then you can insert whatever specific thing you're trying to send. Looks like everything is the same. So the client request, instead of just grabbing that directly and trying to parse through it, we're now going to let our request, our request handler handle that. So it looks like it will take the incoming request text and decode it from bytes and then split it. So we'll have lines of, we'll have the individual lines. And then parse request. Looks like we're going to end up creating a request object. It's kind of like a reformatted version of everything we're getting in the request object. So let's figure that out. Let me just I'm just trying to save some time here. This is not like specific. All right, so I'm just gonna grab this. So this is just, string, parsing a string. It's nothing really specific here. And then in the server, we can do client connection dot send something. So if it's if they go to slash, then we'll do the hello world. Otherwise, we'll send them the current time. So I'm just going to be lazy. There's all kinds of time things you could use. They're telling us to use date time. I'm just going to use time. I like Unix time. All right, and let's see if this works. Use Postman. Okay, so we got some HTML. That's nice. Looks like this works. And the time, like there's a little delay here. Let's go to the other. Okay, that works. Yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, I think Postman is doing some other, it's trying to like persist the connection or something. But if we use cURL, you can just keep making requests for time. So that's basically that. So release 3 is basically just, making this a little more organized. I think that's it. Are there any questions?
So what's the difference between running curl and then just going straight from your command line and running it and then doing Postman?
In this last instance?
Yes.
So I'm not sure, but it seems like Postman is trying to, it's just not as quick. So I don't know if it's trying to persist something or it's like waiting for something else. But so I can make the request, and if I wait, like 10 seconds or something, I think I can make another one. So I'm not sure why. Let me try it in the browser if I get that same issue. So I can just keep refreshing in the browser and it's fine. But for whatever reason, I'm not sure why. If I make a request too quickly, it will just kind of freeze. Any questions about curl or Postman?
Postman's a good resource to have or a good application to have to test requests. So we highly recommend using it.
Yeah, and it's used in the in the real world. It's a regular feature.
Yep.
All right.